You've heard of them, right? Psychedelics. These are substances that carry the weight of ancient rituals, the spark of a cultural revolution, and now, somehow, the promise of cutting-edge neuroscience. Today, we're going to unpack the science that's bringing them back from the fringe and straight into the world's top research labs.
I mean, think about it. For literally thousands of years, indigenous cultures have used things like ayahuasca and psilocybin mushrooms as sacred tools. Then, you fast forward to the 1960s, and they become these huge symbols of the counterculture. It's this really complicated history that shaped everything we think we know about them.
And that's the big question, isn't it? After decades of being pushed to the side, why are places like Johns Hopkins and Imperial College London suddenly pouring millions into studying them as potential breakthrough treatments for things like depression, trauma, and anxiety? Something's clearly changed. Let's find out what.
To really understand what's going on, we have to start with the most complex thing in the known universe, the human brain. Because this isn't magic, it's straight-up neurobiology. So let's take a look at what's actually happening inside our heads when these substances are introduced. So what are we even talking about? Well, at their core, psychedelics are substances that can totally change our experience of reality. How we see, how we feel, how we think, and the key to this whole thing is how they interact with our brain's own chemistry.
So how do they actually do it? It's a pretty incredible three-step dance. First, they basically impersonate our brain's own serotonin, fitting perfectly into a special little lock called the 5-HT2A receptor. That turns the key. Step 2, this quiets down the brain's autopilot, a system called the default mode network. You can think of this as the part of your brain that runs your ego, your sense of self, and it can get stuck in really rigid negative thought loops. You know, the kind you see in depression. With that autopilot offline, the brain suddenly enters this state of incredible flexibility, where parts that don't normally talk to each other start chatting. This is what scientists get so excited about. It's called neuroplasticity.
Now, all this modern science is fascinating, but it's really just the latest chapter in a very, very long story. So let's zoom out for a second and look at the history, because how we got here is just as important as where we are now.
And man, what a journey it's been, from being revered spiritual tools for centuries to being discovered by complete accident in a Swiss lab in 1943 by Albert Hofmann. But then, the 1960s happened, and the cultural panic basically slammed the brakes on all legitimate research for decades. It really wasn't until the 2000s that the scientific community started to cautiously peek behind the curtain again, and that's what sparked the research explosion we're seeing today.
This new research is looking at two totally different ways of using psychedelics. First, let's talk about the big one, the high-dose experience, or the trip. I want you to think of this as the telescope view. It's a tool for seeing the huge, vast, big picture of your own mind and your place in the universe. In a controlled, therapeutic setting, these high-dose sessions can be completely life-changing. We're talking about profound spiritual insights, a feeling of connection to everything. People often experience a massive emotional release of buried trauma, and it creates an opportunity for what's called cognitive restructuring, which is basically a fancy way of saying you get a rare chance to rewrite the old, negative stories you've been telling yourself for years. Okay, so you have the telescope approach, the macro dose. It's a huge, transformative event. But there's a completely different way people are exploring these compounds. Think of it as swapping the telescope for a microscope. This is the microdose, a tiny, subperceptual amount that's not about having a trip at all, but about making subtle enhancements to your daily life. Two totally different ways to use the exact same tool. So let's zoom in with that microscope. This approach isn't about seeing the cosmos. It's about making really fine-tuned adjustments to your everyday focus, your mood, and your creativity, right here on Earth.
The key word here, and you have to remember this, is subperceptual. That means the dose is so small you don't actually feel it. There are no visuals, no big mystical journey. The whole point is to improve your normal, everyday state of being, not to escape it.
And the reported benefits? Well, they're pretty wide-ranging. People who microdose talk about everything from sharper focus at work and big creative breakthroughs to just feeling less anxious or depressed. A lot of people also mention a greater sense of emotional awareness and just a little boost in energy, all without the intensity of a full trip.
And some of these personal stories are just incredibly compelling. You have Sarah, a software developer, who says that microdosing helped her finally overcome a depression that had lasted for 10 years, helping her find a clarity she didn't know was possible.
Or Michael, a teacher who found that his anxiety pretty much just vanished. It allowed him to be more present with his students, more present with his family, and he also mentioned his creativity expanding. That's a theme you hear a lot.
And finally, there's Jennifer, an artist who found that these subtle little shifts were exactly what she needed to shatter her creative blocks. It's the same story again and again. It seems to help people get unstuck and see old problems in a completely new light. Okay, so we've talked about all this amazing promise, but we absolutely have to talk about the peril. Because, and let's be super clear about this, these are incredibly powerful substances at any dose, and they come with very real risks. Understanding them isn't optional, it's essential.
You can really break down the risks into two main buckets. First, the psychological ones. Even in a perfect setting, someone can have a really difficult experience with intense anxiety or panic, what people call a bad trip. And for anyone with a personal or family history of something like psychosis, the risk is much, much higher. Then you've got the physiological risks. They raise your heart rate and your blood pressure, which could be dangerous for anyone with a heart condition.
And this part is absolutely non-negotiable. Psychedelics can have dangerous, sometimes even life-threatening interactions with really common medications like SSRI antidepressants, lithium, or even blood pressure meds. They're also a no-go for anyone with pre-existing heart conditions. This is exactly why going it alone is so risky and why talking to a doctor is so critical.
So, with all this potential on one side and these serious risks on the other, the whole conversation is shifting. It's moving towards harm reduction and responsibility. If a person decides to explore this path, how can they do it as safely as humanly possible?
Well, the experts all point to three pillars of safety. First is set and setting. That's your mindset going in and the physical environment you're in. Both need to be safe and supportive. Second is dosage. The mantra is always start low and go slow, with precise measurements. And third is integration. This is the work you do after the experience, and honestly, it might be the most important and overlooked piece of the entire puzzle.
So what does integration actually mean? It's not just a buzzword. It's how you make sense of the experience. It could be talking it through with a trained therapist, journaling all the insights and emotions that came up, using meditation to stay connected to those feelings, or even using art or music to express it. It's how you turn a weird, powerful experience into real, lasting change in your life.
Look, as the science from these top-tier institutions keeps rolling in, one message is coming through loud and clear. Whether we are talking about a massive therapeutic macrodose or a tiny, subtle microdose, these are not toys. They are powerful tools, and they demand our respect, our caution, and a real commitment to being fully informed. And all of this leaves us with one final big question to chew on. We're getting this incredible fire hose of knowledge about the brain and about consciousness. The science is moving at lightning speed. But the real challenge for us as a society is this: how do we make sure our wisdom keeps up with our knowledge